Welcome to Intro2Astro 2024.
So reading papers is a very fundamental part of doing research in astronomy. And the papers usually keep you up to date with the latest discovery in your field. And being able to read papers effectively will help you identify gaps of knowledge where you can make additional contribution to the field. Also, reading paper will help you improve your own writing skills. So there's a lot of benefit to reading papers carefully and effectively. So before we talk about how to read papers, let's first take a look at where can we find papers first. This is usually through the so-called NASA Astrophysics Data System, or in short, ADS. So the ADS provides access to a vast collection of astronomical literature, including journal articles, conference proceedings, reviews, and book chapters. And the ADS is a very powerful search engine through which you can find papers by, for example, the author name, the abstract or the title, the year of the publication, or keywords in the full text. So if, for example, if we are interested in the so-called super-Earth, which is a type of exoplanets that I work on, you can just type the keywords here and click search. Then ADS will give you a list of papers with that keyword. And you can actually sort the papers using different options. The default is by the date of publication. But one often used sorting method is so-called citation count. The more citations a paper have, usually the more impact it has on the field. For example, the first paper here, the Transit Exoplanet Survey Satellite, is a workhorse spacecraft that NASA launched a few years ago, and it has helped us discover thousands of exoplanets. You can see this paper has been cited almost 3,000 times. So if you click on the link of the paper, it brings you to the paper itself, and there's a bunch of options. The default shows you the title of the paper, the authors, and the abstract, as well as additional information on the publication, for example, the date, and the link through which you can access the paper. On the left, there's a bunch of tabs. This one shows the number of citations on the paper and which paper actually cited it. So ADS is smart enough that you can click on these papers to go to the paper that have cited the paper you're looking at. And the reference tab shows you which paper was cited in the paper you're looking at. And there's also co-reads section, which as the name suggests, that these are papers that are read by those who have been on this page. It's like linked website or something. Similar papers, basically a paper that has similar topics or similar author list. And the metric shows you how many times this paper has been cited over the years, and how many times people have downloaded the paper and read them. And finally, the export citation tab is very useful. This is basically where the code is generated through the code, and you can cite the paper when you're writing the paper. We'll talk more about this when we come to writing scientific papers. Okay, so ADS can help a user locate a paper without going through a large number of papers manually themselves. You can think about ADS.
I can't connect to the Wi-Fi network.
Sorry, my Google. So ADS, you can think about it as a search engine, but for papers. But once you find a paper, usually you can click this button on the right of ADS, and that brings you actually to the paper itself. It's taking a minute for me. Maybe let's try another paper. So on the right, these are links to the actual paper, the PDFs themselves. For example, if you click the link on Arxiv, which is another website that hosts papers in PDF format. If you click that, the paper will be loaded. Sorry, my internet is quite slow at the moment. Anyway, I'll show you another paper that I have loaded earlier. So this is what the archive paper looks like. Has the title, the author, the affiliation, the abstract, and the bulk part of the paper. So another tool I want to introduce you to is called Mendeley. So if ADS is like the search engine, the Mendeley is more like Dropbox. So Mendeley is free to use, and it allows you to download the papers and keep them stored on your own local device. And you can sort the papers into different categories and even annotate the paper. For example, this is, again, a search interface. For example, if we are interested in super Earth, search again. Particularly slow today. Let's try my library. Okay, now you can see a bunch of papers that was listed by myself, and on the left, I've organized the papers into different topics. And if you click on one of these papers, you can read them locally. So the reason why we use Mendeley is, for example, you're traveling on a plane and you decide to read a paper to pass the time, then you can download the paper in advance, save it on Mendeley, and when you're on the plane, you can read the paper and highlight the, for example, key sentences, or even annotate the paper with your own thoughts. And once you land, Mendeley is like Dropbox. It will sync your library across different devices. For example, this is interface you're seeing. For example, I can add a sticky notes here for thoughts that I have. And, you know, all these annotations you have made are shared across different devices. Okay, so that's Mendeley. It's a very handy tool. Now let's talk about a paper itself, the typical structure of a paper. This is a paper that was posted on Arxiv yesterday. So it's a fresh off the oven paper. And this is a pretty typical paper. So a paper usually starts with the title that describes the main topic or the findings of the paper. And there is an abstract, usually, which is a brief summary of the paper, including the objective, the methods, the results, and the key conclusions. It should give the readers a very quick overview of what the paper is about. And usually the paper starts with the introduction section, which gives the background information of the paper and try to summarize the status of the field, identify gaps of knowledge. And usually in the introduction, the authors will pose the key questions they hope to resolve in this work. Then there's also the method section, which is shown here, the observation and data reduction. This is what the author called it. So this section usually outline how the data were collected, or if it is experimental science, it outlines the experimental design, how the data was collected. And usually after the method section, there's a result section, which explicitly explains how the data were analyzed and may describe some statistical analysis of the data. Following the results section, there's usually a discussion section in which the author interprets the results in light of the key questions posed in the introduction. And they may also discuss any limitation of the study and potential sources of error. Usually, the paper ends with the conclusion section here. Here in the conclusion, the author summarizes the key findings of the paper, and they also suggest possible future research directions based on these current results. Okay, So now comes to the question, how do we read a paper effectively? Well, my personal strategy is to start with the title and the abstract. Usually the title and the abstract should give you a very good general idea of what the research topic is and the key findings of the paper. And by reading the abstract, you should ask yourself, is this the paper I'm looking for? Is it relevant to my research? And moreover, is the finding of the paper interesting enough that I should spend the next hour or so reading the paper in detail? If so, then I go to an introduction. A good introduction should basically help you set up, help you understand the background, the objective, and the significance of the work. By the end of the introduction, you should know very clearly what key questions the authors are trying to address. And with those key questions in mind, now you should look at the figures, particularly the captions. So the figures and the captions give you a very good visual overview of the results. And with enough practice, you can determine for yourself if the presented results have resolved the key questions posed in the introduction. And with that, quick overview at the various plots, you can go to the conclusion and you can compare your own interpretation of the results as presented in figures versus the conclusion made by the author. Do you agree with the author, or do you think the authors are overgeneralizing the results? So that should conclude the first round of a quick look of the paper. If you still think the paper is interesting, then you can take a deeper dive into the paper. And this round, what people usually do is look at the methods and the results and the discussion section in detail. And you should pay attention to the experimental design, the analysis technique, and you should formulate your own opinion of the paper. Is it valid, or are the results, or are the analysis rigorous enough? So by the end of this round, if you still think the paper is exciting, then it's time to take some notes. And usually what I try to do is to summarize the key points of the paper with just a few sentences of your own words. And you should probably annotate the key plots and point out the most salient features in the paper. And you should also ask yourself, what are the key assumptions made in the paper? If so, are the assumptions warranted? If not, is there any way that you can prove these assumptions by doing additional work? Sometimes your next research project actually comes from reading others' paper and realize the shortcomings can be addressed. Okay, that's all I want to say about reading the paper. So assignment for this part of the session, reading papers, is here. You should read this paper by Lee, 2018, and this is the archive link. And while you're reading, you should try to do the following. Maybe highlight keywords you don't understand in one color, and maybe look up their definition. You should also highlight key ideas in another color. And you should keep general notes of the summary for each paragraph. Try to summarize each paragraph with just one sentence. And by the end of each section, you should also summarize each section with probably 1 or 2 sentences. Again, you should do the same for each figure. Maybe come up with a quick summary for each figure with 10 words or even less. And by the end of the reading, you should ask yourself some overall questions about the paper. What are the author trying to do? What are key questions being addressed in the paper? And towards the end, you should answer yourself whether those questions have been properly addressed. Okay, so there are 2 additional resources for reading papers. One is from Astrobyte, and the other is actually a journal article on how to read scientific paper. So you should check those out too.
Register now on bit.ly/Intro2Astro 2024.